This is Learning to Dad
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
with Tyler Ross.
But what I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm gonna have fun, and you're gonna have fun.
Yeah, and you've lived in Kentucky your whole life?
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah, it's an interesting state, but yeah, I've lived here my whole life. My practice is here, and I can see anyone who is physically in Kentucky as a client. So I get a lot of people coming in from out of state and even from out of the country, so that we can do evaluations and consultations and that kind of stuff.
I suppose you're prohibited from doing that virtually.
Oh no. I can see anyone in the state of Kentucky virtually. I can do non-clinical services with anyone anywhere in the world. Non-clinical service would be something like a training or just a consultation to say, yes, I know about autism. Would you like to learn about it? But I can't do therapy or evaluations with anyone outside of Kentucky due to licensure stuff.
Copy that. I heard something similarly recently, so I thought that was interesting. I guess state-to-state rules apply on the interwebs as well.
Exactly. And during lockdown, we had a brief, glorious period where they allowed us exactly one session anywhere, and I got to see all kinds of people with that, but they closed the loophole pretty quickly. So,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, Matt Lowry, thank you for being on the podcast. We are recording. I'm excited to talk to you. How's the day going?
It is going so far. I just spent a week off with my son, and I came back to 130 emails. So that is daunting, and I'll get through them hopefully through the rest of the day. We'll see how that goes.
Well, that's great. Well, I'm excited to talk to you. I'm going to read some of the things off of the description I have for you. So, Matt Lowry, LPP. Tell me what LPP is.
It is a licensed psychological practitioner. Okay. And when I got the degree, I thought it was going to be much better known, but it is not. Absolutely nobody knows what I do. So I am essentially a PhD who doesn't supervise people. So I've got all the autonomy of a psychologist or I guess psychologist. But I just don't supervise people. And back in grad school, I learned that supervision was not my thing, and I didn't want to be held to it. So Kentucky has a licensure of you can work independently and not supervise people, and I went with that. But nobody knows what an LPP is, so here we are.
Well, anybody listening now knows. To expand further, you are the father to an autistic son.
I am.
You yourself have autism.
Yep.
You work exclusively with autistic clients doing neurodiversity, affirming autism evaluations, and providing autistic-centered therapy, which it sounds like you were helped in the cultivation and design of that.
Oh yeah.
You're trying to create an autistic-friendly, autistic-ran medical facility and school in Kentucky. And you also host or co-host a podcast called the Autistic Culture Podcast. So I think that your mission on that podcast, advocate for viewing autism as a cultural difference and not as a disorder, something that's to be embraced and not fixed. I think you're going to educate every single listener in here that doesn't have somebody with autism in their life. So tell me what autism is and how it affects you personally.
Well, at its core, it's a genetic difference. Everyone has neurons, the brain cells, right? But most people have a protein called mTOR that tells your brain to dissolve itself. So throughout people's lives, when people respond to this protein, they do a thing called autophage, where these little branches of your neurons are weeded out and dissolved into protein mush. And between ages 12 and 26, most people weed out half of all of their neurons, never to get them back, right? We don't do that. So because we do not respond to the MTOR, we keep our neural connections throughout our lives. We keep our synapses, and therefore we are hyper connected, which means that we are incredibly sensitive to the outside world. We have big emotions. We can be very, very overloaded by sensory input. When we went to Disney, my son had headphones. I had loops. I had a big hat to keep sun out of my face and sunglasses and all this other stuff, because otherwise it would be just overloading. So I build a life around my sensory requirements. I don't wear a tie because, man, I hate ties. Black t-shirts all the way. I see that you're of this club, so well done, sir. And with my experience with this, I try to teach people how to live with their brains and with their bodies instead of trying to force themselves to live a life that doesn't suit them. And this is a big thing for us. And because it's genetic, the heritability rate of autism is 94%. Wow. So an autistic parent is very likely to have an autistic kid. So this is what makes it a cultural thing, because not only do we pass on our genes, not only is it nature, but it's also nurture, because I do things in an autistic way, and my son will learn things in an autistic way. I have to teach him how to live with his brain the same way that I live with my brain. And of course, my parents didn't know anything about this at the time, so I got all sorts of other messages, and it took a lot of undoing a lot of those messages, which we call ableism, a sort of discriminatory thing about your own abilities. And when you think about yourself and saying, "Oh man, I'm a bad person because I can't do that," that's internalized ableism. So I had to overcome a lot of that, and my biggest goal with the podcast is to leave something for my son and any future kids that I might have, so that they know that they are valued, that they are valid, and that they have people to look up to. Like some of the episodes we did are about Walt Disney. We just did one about George Lucas. There's a lot of really, really famous people out there who are clearly autistic when you look at all the hyperconnected neurology and the effects of it. So it's a matter of finding our people and finding how to work in a world that is not built for us.
And I would imagine, I don't know, this is going to be the first conversation of any significance that I've had regarding autism, but I would imagine people are affected by it in a range of ways. Some people might just show a little tiny bit, and some people might be like I don't know if severe is the right word, but like a much stronger association with those impacts. Can you describe that a little bit?
Well, I think the key word there is show, because, for instance, like with me, I am an adult. I've learned a lot of coping mechanisms, and when somebody says, you don't look autistic, it's because I have a lot of things in place to help me deal with a lot of stuff. It doesn't impact me any less. By the end of the day, I might be a giant sensory wreck and have to go sit in a dark room for an hour. But with my son, he's 8, and he's also mostly non-speaking. He's a Gestalt language processor, which means that he speaks in phrases rather than individual words. So if he will say, man, I can't think of something right offhand that need to go to the potty, instead of I have to go pee. It's just a phrase that he's able to repeat, and when he assimilates these phrases, it can have a wide variety of purposes, and other people might not understand him, but again, I get the language, so that could be a thing. But when we went to Disney, he got a disability access services pass to get on the rides, because when we talked to the Disney person, we talked to them online, and the person online said, "Ah, yes, why are you applying?" And I was like, "Well, I'm autistic," and he's like, "Well, you don't look autistic." And then my son shows up half naked, looks at the computer, and screams, "Want to go to Disney? Want to go to Disney? Want?" And then starts getting his clothes on and tried to escape the door. And I was like, "No, this is Mr. Disney. We have to talk to Mr. Disney. Want to go to Disney?" And then the guy on the line was like, "Oh yeah, so he's autistic. All right." And yeah, very visibly autistic. And I have those feelings inside. But again, being an adult and being a professional, I am better able to conceal a lot of that stuff, but it still eats at me inside. So think of it like a duck. You see a duck floating calmly on the surface of the water, but you don't see how fast the little legs paddle underneath. So it looks like the duck is super calm, but he's doing a lot of work to stay in that one place.
And so is that part of what you do, is teach people to do that work within themselves to appear calm on the surface and kind of manage those wildly moving feet?
When appropriate, but I also teach people to give themselves accommodations and do a lot of advocacy work, because I've built my world around not having to kick my feet as hard. I've built my world around a nice, calm environment, especially since telehealth. We're working on, so our autistic-centered location is going to be Trail House in Louisville. You can we've got a website, trailhouse.org, and it's due to open on the 1st of July. Fingers crossed. So we'll see how that goes. But again, everybody who works there is autistic, and we have a lot of accommodations in place there. It's going to be relatively low lighting, relatively low noise. We're going to have a school run by an autistic ADHD teacher who will accommodate a very small class of about 10 kids, all of which who will be autistic ADHD, and find a way for them to do all their core curriculum, because it's going to be a full-fledged micro school, but also learn how to manage emotions and manage personal interactions in an autistic-friendly way. So and that's a big misconception that a lot of people have about autism, is that a lot of people believe that we are non-social or antisocial. But again, when you get to something like Disney or Comic-Con, if you go to a comic book store, there's a lot of discussion about superheroes or, fandoms or that kind of stuff. We're fairly social. It's just that you have to tap into whatever really tickles our brain. We're not a small talk about the day of the week sort of person. So it's a matter of finding ways to enrich autistic people's lives and give them sort of an anthropological study of how to survive in the real world when it's not made for us.
The one friend that I have that revealed to me pretty quickly that he had autism, I do jiu-jitsu with. And one of the first things he said was, "Yeah, I've got some social anxiety. I have a difficult time maintaining eye contact and being around a bunch of people and too much stimulus." And jiu-jitsu he says it kind of helps all of those things. I was so happy for him to be so comfortable with it, to find ways of, working around it and tools that help him. But that was available, more recently, because he's a younger guy. As a child, this autism probably weren't letters that have been strung together to spell the word yet. So At what point in your life did you realize or acknowledge that you were different in that way? And how did that realization moment impact you?
So my story is weird. When I was in first grade, everybody knew that there was something different about me, and my teacher wanted me to do a test, and by all accounts, I started the test and then freaked out and ran out of the school because it was after school, and I was afraid that the janitor would lock us in overnight, because, again, first grade logic. Mm-hmm. So I didn't finish the test, and then in third grade, I had the same teacher because she moved from first to third grade, and she said, "Hey, let's try that test again." And by the end of the test, I was put in a gifted class, and a psychologist started following me around and asking me to do tests like watch 3-2-1 Contact while building Legos, while talking about Planet of the Apes and that kind of stuff. And I didn't know what it was all about, but I was like, hey, whatever, I like this. So I went on, and I ended up going to the University of Kentucky when I was 14, and I was working in the physiology lab studying desynchronization of gonadotropins and how they affect the ester cycle. And while I was there, one of the grad students said, did you know you have Asperger's? And I was like, no, what's that? And I ended up going to work in the autism lab, and it turns out that the guy who followed me around for all those years ran the autism lab. Wow. And it turns out that I was in one of those studies testing the intersectionality of giftedness and autism, and I had no idea. So I was identified like first grade, but not officially until I was a teenager. But I worked in the autism lab, and I worked with autistic kids, and when I went into community mental health, I worked with a lot of autistic kids in the school system. We ran groups where we talked about like Pokemon cards and Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, and they all got together, and they all wanted to hang out at the library, and it was great. But I stayed largely in the neuro closet because there's a lot of biases about our competency. Because there's this thing called the double empathy problem, where a long time ago somebody was doing research, and they thought that we don't have what we call theory of mind, the ability to take other people's perspectives, because ironically the people doing the study didn't have the ability to take the perspective of the autistic people. So they believed that we can't do, and that was the whole thing. And there's been a lot of literature since then, but there's a lot of people out there who believe that we are somehow lacking in humanity, that we don't have empathy, that we don't have social skills. And as a therapist, there's a lot of people out there who have questions about that. So I stayed in the closet for a very, very long time, until it was obvious that my son was autistic. Because when he came out and he was like, oh, ceiling fans, this is great. I'm just going to sit here for hours and study ceiling fans. Like, oh, there it is. And, you know, he had no interest in setting up, so I set him up, and he was like, whoa, this is game-changing. I want to set up all the time. And, you know, the same with walking and talking and all this other stuff. And I was like, yeah, I've got to come out, and I've got to be on the front lines, because I've got to be a role model, and I've got to change the world to make it an easier place for him so he doesn't have to go through all the crap that I went through. So I ended up burning a lot of bridges with people when I came out, because there were, again, a lot of biases. Even just a few months ago, I was talking to a group of psychologists, and I was saying, yeah, most of my mom's family is autistic. I'm autistic. My son's autistic. It runs in families. And one of the psychologists asked, is he your biological son? And I was like, yep. And then he's like, well, how did you make him? And I was like, the old-fashioned way. What do you ask? You want details? But they were very much under the impression that we cannot breed, which, again, a pretty human concept. So, I realized that my work was cut out for me with all this kind of stuff, because if the assumption is that we are either infantile or lacking in physiology, that's a really interesting place to start, especially with psychologists. So we're just people. We just do things a little differently.
That's so absurd to me and backwards that people would think that way. Of course, I'm not in the world where I'm engaged with folks like that. And in fact, whenever I find a friend or a professional that I find to be a little bit odd, like a little socially awkward, but they always have a gift. Like they're an incredible doctor or really great at jiu-jitsu, or what, they've got some thing that makes them special. And I would change that little bit of social awkwardness to have that gift that they have. Do you find that to be kind of like, maybe that's just my perception, and I'll say, you know what, I bet they have some level of autism, because they are just so gifted in this thing that they've got this focus and this ability to understand it in a way people don't. Does that seem is that common or fair to say?
I like the weird people of the world. Whenever I'm doing an evaluation or I meet somebody for the first time, and there is something very, very strikingly different about them, I light up inside with that. And so we call that, for instance, like with the jujitsu, that is a monotropic focus, where somebody can get really, really, really into the zone and really focus on that. And we thrive on the monotropic focus. For instance, like Walt Disney loved trains. And Disneyland was based around 4 trains because he had a big train set in his backyard. All of his friends he met at the train store. If there was a guy who really had great art, the chances are he met him at the train store because that's where he socialized. And Disneyland was based around a whole bunch of trains so he could go and ride trains all day. And his brother, Roy, was the business person where Walt Disney said, hey, I want to invent a new camera. Hey, I really want to invent sound with cartoons. And Roy would roll his eyes and say, Walt, that's insane. Don't do that. And he said, but I really want to do this thing. And he kind of latched onto it, and that's what made him really cool. And when we went to Disney World, as soon as you enter the park, there's these giant placards full of information about trains, Walt's model trains, and this, just the most autistic thing ever. Also, the voice of the parks, the guy who does all the voice on the trams and the boats and the monorail is Corey Burton, famous actor, also autistic. So yeah, it's really, really neat when you find these really intense interests and these really, really focused just passions. And I love diving into that because it's a whole new world. Like if somebody has, a collection of 100 plushies or musical instruments or books or trains or whatever, I find it fascinating because chances are they know way more about whatever they have than anybody else. So I'm a sponge for information. I'll just sit and talk about it all day.
That's so funny you would say that because the folks that just moved across the street from us have a son that's autistic, and he is 1,000% into trains. I showed him I showed him one of my friend's train collections, and he was zooming in on the picture, and he's going, "Is that a QL476 or is that a QL475?" You look at that and look at this, and it's like, oh my God, this kid knows everything.
Yeah, encyclopedic knowledge. It's fantastic.
Oh, it's amazing. So you've got a son that's autistic, and he's 8 years old. So 8 years ago, you had your first child. You identify him as being autistic. How did that change the way you manage yourself?
It made me realize that I had a lot of what we call internalized ableism, and that I was pushing myself far, far, far too hard to be quote unquote normal. And I spent a lot of time in burnout. I spent a lot of time just... I use the phrase... I use facetiously the phrase, have you tried just suffering? Because a lot of people will say, yeah, just push through it. You'll be fine, when it kills us. And that's the thing about cortisol, because we are very, very susceptible to, cortisol and the damage done by that, because it causes like epigenetic changes that causes like autoimmune disorders and a lot of health problems, because we are constantly bombarded by stimuli that just wrecks our meat bodies. And I realized when my son was, just a baby, that I didn't want to push him to do the stuff that I had been pushed to, and that I had to reevaluate like everything in my life. And that's when my my marriage ended, because my ex is neurotypical and I am not, and she does not understand this kind of stuff. She also recently tried to put him into therapy to quote unquote fix him, which I had to end because, it's not something to be fixed, it's something to be understood, and we still don't see it eye to eye on any of that. But it was rough, and that's why I want to make the world more aware, and that's why the Autistic Culture podcast is essentially the PR department for autism, to try to reframe a lot of this instead of a tragedy. Because when my son, I knew since my son was like 1 that he was autistic. But my ex did not want to see it because he made eye contact and he spoke and he could walk and talk and be a human, you know. So I said, no, take him to one of my friends. We can do an evaluation. We can get him. And she's like, no, your friends are biased. I want to go with somebody else. So she went with somebody else. And the somebody else wrote a report that said that it's a tragedy that he's autistic, that he will never, ever be, quote, normal, that he will live a limited life, and that he needs to be fixed for his own sake. And when we were doing the evaluation, he decided that my son has an IQ of 70 because he kept trying to talk about electric towers. He drew, again, like with the trains, my son knows like 18 varieties of electric towers, and he will sit and draw them, you know, meticulously, because again, he's got a very, very good memory. And he said, yeah, he's got an IQ of 70. All he wants to do is talk about electric towers and go get a vanilla milkshake with his father. And it's really, really pathologizing. And when we were talking to him, he started talking about how, you know, it's a tragedy and nobody knows what causes autism and this. I was like, yes, we do. There's a lot of research about what causes autism. It's genetics. And started talking about the mTORs, and it's been known since like 2007 with Supercar et al. And all this other stuff. And he just laughed and said, we'll agree to disagree then. And I was like, no. Just because you don't know something doesn't mean that other people don't know this. You are bad at this. And again, it was a very, very discouraging a time. We need people out there who are more autism affirming, and people who don't pathologize us and who just say, oh yeah, they're a little different, instead of wanting to cure us, because we don't need cures. We don't need to be fixed. We need accommodations. We need to be understood. If an autistic person is having a rough time, we need to understand why they're having a rough time. For instance, like, you know, with the school, the reason we're doing the school is because there's a lot of autistic and ADHD kids who might have meltdowns at school, because school is a very crowded, noisy place, and they might freak out and run out of the classroom. And a lot of people say, well, they just need to be better behaved. They just need to be punished more. But we don't do synaptic pruning. We don't do acclimation. We don't follow behaviorism. Behaviorism is nonsense for us because that's not how our brains are wired. So they're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole and doing a lot of damage to the peg in the process. So yeah. Man, I don't know where the question went on that.
Oh no, that was wonderful. To somebody who is not autistic, maybe a husband and wife who has a kid that is autistic, and they've identified it, and they're going through the, oh my gosh, the life that I was expecting is not the life that I'm going to have. What are maybe the first step or two that you would suggest that they take in becoming more affirming and understanding and accommodating?
Learn from autistic people. Yeah, learn from autistic people. Find that autistic people are people just like anybody else. Every human on Earth has a set of strengths and weaknesses. No two people are exactly the same. Because, God, what a boring world that would be. Yeah. So, you know, you just have to find... And that's another thing. No two autistic people are alike either. So, you know, if you might find someone who really loves trains. Somebody else might like, I don't know, electric towers. Somebody else might like Led Zeppelin. I mean, honestly, Pink Floyd, man. I mean, we could go on for hours. But, yeah. But that's the thing. Everybody is different. And accepting your child as a human being first. And just knowing that autism is just another thing that makes somebody who they are. It's not it's a large component, but it's not people are not their diagnoses. Diagnoses make a person, but it's not limited to who we are. I am not an autism. I am Matt, but autism is a big part of who I am. So just learn about your child, learn about their strengths, learn about their weaknesses, and talk to autistic people. Seek out autistic resources. Because that's the thing, like, Autism Speaks is notorious for wanting to hear us. There was a large push a while ago to try to eliminate the autism gene to make sure that no autistic kids would ever be born. That's eugenics. It's horrifying. And they have a 100-day kit that used to include the advice that you hold a funeral for your child because the child that you thought you knew is dead.
Wow, that's horrible.
Yeah. They had a short film, and the second vice president of Autism Speaks was talking about how she was so overwhelmed with her autistic child that she had a period where she planned to drive off a bridge with her and her autistic child in the car, but decided not to because she had a neurotypical child who needed her, as the autistic child played behind her and could hear all of this stuff. And this is not something secretly said. This is part of their advertising campaign, and you can find it right now on YouTube. And they're still proud of this. So it's just the knowledge that we are people. We are humans. We have strengths, we have weaknesses, we have love, we have pain, we have hopes, we have dreams, same as anybody else. And our hopes and dreams may involve bridge making or electric tower making or riding on a train. But we also, my son, I recently took him to the Railway Museum to see Big Thomas, because a life-size Thomas the Train went there. And everybody there, staff and visitors alike, were autistic. It was really cool. And again, the small talk for our people is, that's a diesel locomotive, and going into the details like with your neighbor. And we'll just sit there and like, yes, that's fantastic. Tell me more, sir. And of course, everybody was just having a great time talking about trains and playing with trains, and it's a wonderful, wonderful world if you want to dive into it, and we're very accepting of people who want to learn about all this stuff, as long as you don't try to cure us, because we prefer not to. So
it blows my mind, and the limited exposure I've had to the kid across the street, my friend at jiu-jitsu, and just talking to you, I can't imagine somebody coming to any conclusion other than, well, he just doesn't like it when the lights are bright and there are people around it and just doesn't want to be there. So
exactly.
Yeah, but you talk about trains, the electricity thing. I'm curious, did you have a thing that you're just obsessed with? Because it seems, if nothing else, it's your work that you've thrown yourself into. But is there some obscure random thing?
It definitely is my work. I am a huge expert on autism because I love researching it. But I also have a wall of lightsabers. And I've got like 40 lightsabers. Some of them I've made myself. Some of them, just from various places. When I was a kid, I had one of the top 50 Star Wars sites in England for some reason, because they one of my pen pals was Bill Hootkins, who played Porkins in Star Wars, the first Star Wars, and so Star Wars is definitely one of those. I've got a huge library. I am fascinated by myths and tales from around the world, because I really think that you learn a lot about a people by their stories. So mythology has become a major, major interest, and I love that there are certain stories that just have different flavors depending on where people are in the world. For instance, like every culture has dragons, and it's great, and nobody knows why. People that have never ever met each other have dragons in their mythology. So I have a huge collection of myths and tales from every corner of the world, and every time when I go to a bookstore, I will always look for something new if I don't already have something from that region, because it's fantastic. And it's just these things that, so we call it autistic euphoria, because when there's this kind of stuff, it makes us light up. And for instance, like with my son, He loves towers. He loves the Eiffel Tower. We get books about the Eiffel Tower every time we go out. And one day we went to the Lego store, and they had this 5-foot tall Eiffel Tower on display. So he just screeched at the top of his lungs and did this little stomping dance and ran around and started talking to anybody who would listen about how much he loved the Eiffel Tower. And of course we had to bring the Eiffel Tower home with us, and it currently sits in my kitchen on a special table because it's huge. And he was just so overjoyed. He was glowing. And I recognized that a lot of people don't have that. I realized a few months into my relationship with my ex, she did not have the same sort of passion I did for, like, anything. Like, even with Marvel, she likes Marvel, but she doesn't, do the obsessive research that I do, or, looking up who's who on IMDb, or Wikipediaing things late into the night, or researching all the comic books leading up to the new movie, or, that kind of stuff. I dive really, really hardcore into it. A lot of people don't. And I find it really, really enriching, but I understand that that's not how most people are wired.
Do you think those with autism who have that kind of thing, maybe your son with electricity, do you think that, or towers, do you think that would be a good kind of career path for him to pursue?
Yeah, because, again, like with me and the autism, it's not something that I have to push through to learn. It's something that calls to me. Mm-hmm. And it makes work super, super easy because it's something that I love, and that I am always at the top of my field because I am always learning about new research. I am always reading. I am always learning. I can talk about this kind of stuff for hours, and it makes my life really, really easy. So if he loves electric towers and he wants to study them and he wants to work with them, then by all means, that's definitely his path. And I encourage people to go with their flow, with a capital F, because do whatever calls to you, autistic or not, because that's what you're going to be best at. And you need a life that you don't need to escape from, that you love what you do every second of the day. I encourage people to be their best selves and to live a life that makes them happy.
Yeah, if we're going to talk about eugenics, we should probably talk about adding the autism gene to people if we're going to do anything. I'm getting here envious about how obsessed you are with things, and I'm like, I wish I loved something that much all the time.
There was a thing a while back that claimed that Peppa Pig turned kids autistic because kids started mimicking the British accent. So I facetiously made an award for Peppa Pig because she was our greatest recruiter. So, yeah. It's join up.
Yeah, my friends that go to University of Alabama and come back with a southern accent are autistic too, I suppose. Or Alabama is an autistic school.
Yeah, there's a thing called echolalia where we unconsciously pick up that kind of stuff, and it's fascinating. And for instance, like with The Simpsons, when I was studying for my licensure, I could not get stats down to save my life, but I had a marathon of The Simpsons running in the background, and it turns out I unconsciously memorized like 9 years of Simpsons, and I can go through the entire monorail song, but still can't tell you about statistics. It's something that my brain completely rejects. But when we went to Disney, I sang the monorail song consistently in my head, not out loud because I knew it would bug everyone around me. But here we are.
Well, I know we both are backing towards our time here. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but I'd love to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions.
Go for it.
So, as a dad, if we were going to design the perfect dad, what are 2 or 3 of the foundational characteristics that you would start building that super dad out of?
Number 1, listen and listen to your child, understand your child, be open to learning new things, because I don't think that anyone has the perfect parent. I don't think that the perfect parent really exists, but you can always refine yourself and your parenting technique. And something that works today might not work tomorrow, so you must evolve along with it. And just keeping in mind, my biggest thing is that I recognize that the only finite resource I have is time. I can always earn more money. I can always get more dishes if you break something. We can always buy more toys, but the only thing that we don't have, that we can never get more of, is time. So whenever possible, right now he is with his mother this week. But when he is with me, my attention is solely dedicated to him. I want him to know that everything that I do with the expectation that I'm building the next generation. I will be obsolete. I am building the next version, and he will build the next version. He will build the next version, and each generation has to improve upon its predecessor. So it is our goal to make the next generation better than us, by whatever means you need. So yeah, research, learn, and be respectful that you have a finite amount of time to shape a little human into a good human being. So yeah, that's what I do.
What is a skill that you're particularly excited to be teaching or to teach eventually your son?
Oh man, I love all kinds of stuff. So he got a monorail toy while we were at Disney, and it didn't work. So I was like, here, check this out. And I whipped out my tiny screwdriver because I always have tools on me, as is the way. And I was like, oh, yes, I'll take it apart, fiddle with it. Oh, look, it works again. Isn't that cool? All we have to do is this and this and this and this, and all of a sudden things work. And I love teaching, like, hey, come check this out. We're going to do this today. There's so much neat stuff to learn out there. My son learned at like 3 how to make coffee because he loved pouring liquids at the time. And he just watched me, and then he would just get up and wander into the kitchen. I would hear the coffee maker going. And I'm like, what you doing, son? So for a time I was drinking like 14, 15 cups of coffee a day, and I could see sound. So, yeah. He's always learning. He's always... I learned that I have to be very selective with my language. And like when we're driving in traffic, I have to be very selective because I would casually throw out the F-bomb and he would repeat it. So I had to learn to say, oh, people. And then when he's playing with his stuff, he would just scream, oh, people. And that became the cuss word. So it's fascinating to see what kids pick up on and what kids learn, and that there are always these little information sponges. So it's a really, really fascinating thing to be a parent. So yeah, my fiance also has an autistic son, and we have been working on Jedi school and teaching patience and teaching listening. And I've got some great videos of Disney of him just spinning in a circle and just running in a circle, and I'm like, yeah, there it is. And
there it is.
She recognized there was something different about him, but she didn't see the tism until I started pointing out all of it, and she's like, oh. So it works out really well. And it's great to be able to say, yes, I'm very proud of you, you did this well. This not so great, we could work on this, but this was very good. And just focus on refinement, because that's what parenting is about. It's refining the next generation into some good people.
Yes, I agree. That's great. And then fictional or real, is there a father figure, whether in your life or on TV or in a movie, that you always just thought was great?
I think 2 of them, Yoda and Optimus Prime, because that's Yoda. Ultimate wisdom, everything every line out of that Muppet's mouth is pure gold. It is ultimate refinement, ultimate zen. When they were writing for Yoda, they actually consulted like all of the great books of the world, and it's just distilled wisdom. And Optimus Prime, I mean, he's a red, white, and blue semi-truck that sounds like John Wayne. He is the most American thing ever, which is ironic considering he came from Japan. But, just Peter Cullen, the voice of Optimus Prime, based the character on his brother Larry, who was a Marine. And he, whenever asked about the voice of Optimus Prime, he said that when Larry came back from Vietnam, he was changed and he had PTSD. And Larry said that if you're going to be a hero, be strong enough to be gentle, because that's what makes a hero. A hero doesn't just go in guns a-blazing. A hero is strong, but you don't have to be forceful. So Optimus Prime was always the great leader, but also a philosopher, and also had all this other stuff going on, and just a very, very gentle, wise person. And again, robot. And had the matrix of leadership, which had the accumulated wisdom of all the Autobots. And that's what made him the leader, the accumulated wisdom. And I was like, oh yeah, that's and then in the movie they killed him off. And like, Dad's dead now. Fantastic. But yeah, those are the fictional people that I would emulate. I've got a number of real people, but again, humans are a lot trickier in that everybody has good parts and bad parts. Fictional characters can be all good because they're fantasy. So I roll with that.
It's great. It's one of my favorite answers ever, and I'm excited to ask you this question too. When in your life do you feel the most love?
Man, when my family smiles at me, and every once in a while we have what we call family cuddles, because my son just loves, he's 8, of course. When he was a baby, he would just latch onto me and cuddle, and now he's very big, so when he jumps on my lap, I scream in pain. But we will all sit on the bed together and just all hug, and he just smiles real big, and my fiance is happy, and my stepson-to-be is happy, and it just, I feel like I'm doing it right, because everybody is happy and wants to be there.
It's awesome. If this one, I think you're going to have fun with this one. Oh. Suspend time, space, reality, the limitations of money, and the world is the universe. It's all on you. If you could give a gift to every father on the planet, what's a gift that you would give every dad?
Patience. I think that a lack of patience is really what harms people. It leads to a lot of frustration. It leads to a lot of arguments. It leads to a lot of misunderstanding. But with enough patience, you can learn anything. With enough patience, you can understand things. You can understand people. You can get through tough times with enough patience. And I think that the world is severely lacking in that.
All right, and before I ask you the final question, let's tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find your podcast, social media, website, and the rest.
Oh, yeah. autisticculturepodcast.com and Matt Lowry, LPP, MATTLOWRY, LPP, as in licensed psychological practitioner.com. We're also on Facebook at Autistic Connections, because we made a group for, I had... when I started out with a private practice, I had a whole bunch of autistic people who wanted to get together and talk, and they just started talking on my professional page. And I said, no, HIPAA. So here is a group full of people. So now we have like 2,000 people in there. So clients and just random people who found us. So we're at Autistic Connections, and as long as you want to support autistic people, as long as you don't want to quote unquote cure us, you're more than welcome to come on in.
Awesome. And then my last question for you today is, should this recording last forever and every Lowry generation for the next 10 generations gets to listen to it, what's a message you would share with them?
Oh, man, that's a tricky one. We'll go with Bill and Ted, and be excellent to each other.
I love it. Thank you so much, Matt.
My pleasure. It's been fun.